Thank you. I'm like blushing. It's nice to meet all you guys. That was a super awesome introduction. I promise I'm not as cool as they made me sound, but I'm excited to jump in here and share some stuff with you guys. I'm going to share my screen real quick. I'm going to quickly just introduce myself just so you guys like have some context of who I am. And then we'll jump in and I want to talk to you a little bit about online leads. I'll preface this by saying I don't know everything. I don't claim to know everything. I think I actually know very little in the grand scheme of things, but I've spent the last decade of my life learning basically like the online lead game. And I'll kind of tell you guys about how and what and why here momentarily. So to quickly introduce myself, just so you guys have some context, I'm going to go through 4 things today. We're going to talk specifically, I'm going to talk for 15 seconds about who I am and why. The reason I think that's important is, have you guys ever like followed someone on the internet on like Instagram or TikTok or Facebook or whatever, and they're like a guru and they're pumping knowledge out into the space, and you're like, does this person actually know what they're doing? Right? And it's kind of like freaky. That's the reason why I want to intro you guys to me just a little bit, because I promise I'm not blowing smoke. I'll give you guys a quick overview of like just online leads in general. I think the first step to learning how to convert them at the highest possible level is understanding what's going through a consumer's brain when they actually initially connect with us, right? Online leads are not something that have existed for 20, 30, 40 years. Think about it. We've been doing real estate the same way at this current iteration of where we're at, I think, since like the late 80s, early 90s, when the last time commissions actually changed, right? So like we're not 100 years into this thing, right? This is still all fairly new. And I would argue that online leads as a whole, when I first started my career, looked a lot different than they do today. So I want to give you guys a quick understanding of what consumer expectation and mindset actually looks like at scale. We'll talk about converting online leads 101. I'm going to walk you today through the macro level process. So converting leads is easy when you stop thinking about it like a bajillion different conversations and start thinking about it in chunks. There's about 5 of them. So if we break it down into a process, we don't really get lost. You get lost when you don't have a map. My goal is to give you guys a map, right? At the end, I'm going to give you guys your first batch of scripts to download. The reason I'm not going to do that at the beginning is because you'll all be on your phones reading the scripts and going, oh my God, this is sick, right? And instead of paying attention. So I'm going to make it fun. If you guys can't tell, I'm not a super formal guy. Super down to earth. I care. And it's going to come across that way. So a quick intro to me. I hate doing this, but I'm going to tell you guys what I've done. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Humanize. We work with, very luckily, Sheila and Misty and about 250 other teams and brokers nationally. I'm a speaker and a coach. So I work directly with Tom Ferry. I'm on the road with him about 180 days a year. I've spent, I don't know, probably like 100 hours on airplanes this year, right? A lot of maniacal traveling and talking and speaking at things. I built about $1.5 billion team in 28 months. Before that, I spent 5 years at Zillow.com. So normally people want to throw like rotten fruit at me when I say I worked at Zillow, because Zillow is the enemy. But I learned a lot about building teams and people, and I've been on the other side of the fence, right? Which gives me a really unique perspective. Beyond that, I love investing in startups at a small level. I love the whole startup and VC community. It's something I'm really passionate about. And I've spent about 10 years in the space. So I've coached, I don't know, a couple thousand real estate agents. I've distributed over 100,000 online leads in my day. I think I've probably done more online lead conversion and distribution than probably anyone. Without being an egomaniac and saying I'm the best ever. That's not how I operate. If anyone's on social and wants to chat, that's my Instagram handle. How you guys are going to get your scripts here shortly is by actually sending me a DM on Instagram. So we'll walk through that here shortly. Now, before we jump in, I want to kind of frame your guys' mind a little bit before we just jump in and start throwing up a bunch of knowledge on you. My ask is this. I think that the greats in any space and in any industry or any career or whatever it may be, get that way by staying coachable, regardless of how long you've been in the business, right? Like when I'm around my mentors and really intelligent people, there's always a common thread, which is they ask a lot of questions, right? They seek to understand and they come in with an open mind. So get it? Open mind. There's a neon screen with an open on it. Get it? Haha. Okay, Chris. The idea here is I don't know everything. I do know a lot about online lead conversion specifically. So if you have preconceived notions in your brain or opinions around how online leads have worked for you in the past, out of curiosity, by a show of virtual hands, has anyone ever spent their own money on like Zillow leads or realtor.com leads or Facebook or Instagram or anything? Cool, a bunch of people. Normally, when I ask that question, there's two camps of people in the audience. People that are like, yeah, Chris spent the money, rocked it, right? And then there's people that are like, Chris spent the money, Zillow sucks, right? Or realtor.com sucks, or these leads are horrible. There's only two camps of people in that. My ask is, if you've had a bad experience, or you have a friend who's had a bad experience, or a cousin, sister, brother, dad, mom, dog, cousin, it doesn't matter. Come in with an open mind, because I'm going to tell you why people usually don't find success with it. And again, this is because I've done it myself. I worked at Zillow. I probably cold called some of you at some point to try and sell you Zillow leads a decade ago when I was a child, right? But come in with a blank mind, blank slate, and see if there's a couple of things you can take in here. I'm not saying scrap your entire process. I'm saying think about it a little differently, right? And look at it through a little bit different of a lens, and maybe take one or two things out of today's presentation where you go, huh, I didn't really think about it that way, right? Cool. Let's get the party started. Come on. So I want to talk a little bit about, and this is where I'm going to engage you guys. There's a kind of a myth in the space right now, right? And there's these ideas around what a good lead looks like. For those of you guys that have the ability to, if you could humor me for 2 seconds and go into the chat, and I want you to kind of tell me, or maybe even come off of mute, if you want to raise your hand and tell me, what does a good lead look like to you? When you hear the word, I got a good online lead, what does that usually mean to you in your brain? Can someone humor me and give me an idea of what good looks like? Gracelia, let's see. She just joined. Is anyone going to be a brave volunteer and raise their hand for me, or am I going to bravely volunteer?
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. So we got Kay saying vetted and ready to go. One that picks up the phone, 1 to 3 months, pre-approved, a serious buyer. Ooh, Amanda. That's what I was looking for. Amanda, can you come off of mute for 2 seconds and tell me what you mean by like a vetted buyer? What does that mean?
Sorry, I'm in a closing right now, actually.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What was the question? Sorry.
What does a vetted buyer look like to you?
Someone who is, actively looking on their own, someone that has been already reaching out to lenders.
Cool.
And sorry, I'm distracted right now.
You're good. That's plenty. I just wanted to hear what serious buyer looked like. That's plenty. Thank you, Amanda.
Okay.
And you're at a closing. That's way more important. That's moolah time. Perfect. So the reason I wanted to get you guys in this frame of mind and talking about what like a good lead actually looks like, some of you guys might hate me when I say this, and that's okay, right? You won't hate me by the end, I promise. There are no bad leads, right? Bad leads, in my opinion, are completely unviable. So let me give you an example of a bad lead. A bad lead is where you get like the lead comes through and his name is Bill Clinton and his email address is SpongeBobSquarePants@gmail.com and the phone number is 999-9999. That's the only bad lead in my brain. The way I want you to start thinking about it is, if it were as easy ever is go online, buy a bunch of leads and make millions of dollars because they're all perfect, I wouldn't be here right now. And I don't think any of you guys would be either. I would be running God's greatest real estate brokerage on the planet. I'd be on an island drinking a mojito, right? But the reality is leads take time. And the way I want you to start thinking about leads is there are no bad leads except for bogus leads. There are just leads that are going to take a little bit longer to convert, right? And when you think about and look at really, really standout performances, I've gathered this information after doing this a bajillion times. That's a lot of zeros if you didn't know what that number is. I have friends of mine and agents that used to work with me that'll open, I've seen people do 10, 15 transactions a month with online leads. Does it start where they join a team and then close 15 deals month one? No, it's called pipeline, right? It builds cumulatively, but the key is staying in touch with people and staying with them regardless of where they're at in their cycle, continually trying to find ways to provide value. So then all of a sudden you've been nurturing for someone for 3, 4, 5 months and you get that random phone call saying, oh my God, William, I'm ready to rock now, right? We've been looking at property and I want to have a conversation. That doesn't happen if you don't stay in touch, right? So the idea of good leads, all leads are good. If you have viable name, phone number, and email from someone, that is a good lead. I've had scenarios before with online leads where someone has come through. I met with them initially, come to find out they've got a 320 FICO score and they're not buying anything almost ever, but you did such a good job with them that guess what happens? They refer you their family and friends and you didn't even do a transaction with them. All we should be after is having conversations with people and providing value, because guess what happens when you do that? I sound like a hippie when I say stuff like this, but you put good stuff out into the universe and good stuff comes back to you. You find a way to be useful and provide value, it always comes around, right? It's almost karmic. So no bad leads except SpongeBob SquarePants Bill Clinton leads. Does that make sense to everyone? Cool. Let's keep the party going. So I want to give you a quick recap, different types of lead sources and kind of what the consumer mind is going through. We've got Google pay-per-click, which you guys are doing a lot of, which is a fantastic lead source, right? We've got Zillow, we've got Realtor.com, we've got Facebook and Instagram stuff, we've got Zillow Flex, we've got all these different platforms. What I wanted to talk to you about is what's going through a consumer's mind on these different platforms and on these different things when they actually submit an inquiry. Do we think it's a fair statement when I say that consumer expectation out of service providers has changed over the last 10 years? What we expect out of people. I'll give you an example. My father is 67 years old. God bless him. He's the nicest guy on the planet, right? My dad, about a year ago, got his first iPhone. Up until then, he was on a flip phone, right? Was kind of just like doing his thing. I was over at his house like 6 months ago, and my dad likes Johnny Walker Blue Label, right? He goes, "You want to see something super cool?" And I go, "Yeah, Dad, show me what's super cool." He takes out his glasses. They're way down on his nose like this. He pulls out his phone, does something, and he goes, "It'll be here in 15 minutes. And I go, "What will be here in 15 minutes? And he goes, "The Johnny Walker Blue Label." And I go, what? He's like, "I postmated it." And I'm like, whoa, right? That's new. That's interesting. That means consumerism is changing. The way I want you guys to think about this and why I'm talking about this is consumers' expectation out of service providers has changed dramatically over the last 10 years. Right? If we're not focused on giving people a world-class, fast, efficient, white glove level of service, guess what? Someone else will. Every interaction we have with them, I hear a lot. I talk to a lot of different team leaders and agents and kind of broker all over the place on a weekly basis. And right now, especially, there's a little bit of a sense of like entitlement that's happening in our industry, right? And I'm not pointing fingers. I'm not saying this is you guys. But with the NAR stuff that's happening now, I hear a lot of agents saying things and seeing them say it on the internet, which is even crazier to me because that lives forever, right? Things like, "I know my value. I'm not working with anyone unless they're pre-approved and they've signed an agreement," and blah, 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 blah. Does that level of entitlement and like expectation align with a white glove level of service with a customer? It kind of does, but it kind of doesn't at the same time. I'm not saying show people houses that aren't pre-approved and don't want to work with you and just wing it. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is with how consumer expectation is now and what they expect out of every service provider. I'll give you another example. 10 or 15 years ago, if you wanted to buy something on the internet, I was pumped when that stuff showed up at my house like a week later. I was like, "Oh my gosh, that was so fast," right? Now you go on Amazon, I ordered a bottle of vitamins last night at like 10:30, 11 o'clock because I realized I was out. It was at my doorstep by 6 a.m. this morning, right? That level of fast, efficient, high customer service thing is bleeding over into every single industry that we're in now, right? Including real estate. The expectation from us as a service provider is very, very, very high. So these different lead sources and coming through, I want to give you a 30,000-foot view of kind of how they get to you from a consumer standpoint. If we're all familiar with the Zillows and the Realtor.coms of the world, right? The good news is leads that come through these websites, these people are on a portal. They're actively looking at homes. They're not doing anything else. They're not scrolling on Facebook or Instagram and then see an ad and go, "Ooh, that's a pretty house. I want to talk to an agent." They're on these websites looking specifically at homes. So when they come through, most of the time they're ready, willing, and able to have a conversation. The same thing goes with the Google pay-per-click. These people are going on a real estate website in some way, shape, or form and reaching out specifically around a property detail, right? It's our job to meet them where they're at and have a conversation. Does this make sense to everyone? Cool. Let's talk a little bit about why most agents fail, and then I'm going to start breaking down the process for you. Before I do that, and I want to get your guys' mind framed around this, because sometimes people here are like, oh my gosh, Chris, you're Carly calling us out. Think about it like this. Has anyone moved brokerages more than 2 or 3 times in their career? Right? Most of us have. I have, right? As agents, we have this, I don't want to call it a disease, right? But it's this thing, and I'm an agent, so I can say this. We do this thing where when our production isn't where we want it to be, instead of looking in the mirror and saying, hey, maybe I got to do something different, what do we do sometimes? I should move brokerages, right? We think about that, and we're just like constantly kind of like spitballing these ideas. The way I want you to think about it is, if you're not having the amount of success you'd like to with online leads right now, we have to do something different to get something different, right? It's the same concept with moving brokerages and moving around and doing this whole thing. Most agents fail with online leads because they lack a basic framework to create a duplicable, consistent, and scalable ultimately process when it comes to conversion, right? We kind of just wing it. The first conversation isn't uniform. When we're meeting with a customer face-to-face and we're actually conducting a showing, it's not a uniform process. We're just kind of winging it and hoping that something sticks. That doesn't work at scale. From what I've talked to Misty and Sheila about, you guys are getting a good amount of online leads. When you're getting as many as you are, it's tough sometimes to do the same thing over and over and over again, because let's face it, we all have a million things going on in our lives, right? It's not just like we get to focus on real estate for 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have children and spouses and obligations in our personal lives that lead to us kind of being all over the place. And that's just the reality and nature of the business. Having a standardized uniform process is what's going to give us the ability that regardless of what happens, regardless if we're on our way to a showing and little Timmy in the backseat eats a Hot Wheel and we got a detour to urgent care, right? We've got a plan now that when it gets hot, we have the ability to perform still. Does this make sense to you guys? So this is the process I'm going to be teaching you over the next 8 weeks, is how to actually break it down. So the process itself is really simple. I want you to start thinking about it like this. And if you're a note-taking type of person, this is where I would start being a scribe, or I can send you guys the deck after we're done as well, so you have it. The first thing you need to think about is the intake of the online lead, right? So the initial conversation that you have when a lead is brand new or it's your first time making contact with them, right? This first conversation, the way I want you guys to think about it, who here has been on a first date in the last 20 years? And that should be like a lot of people, right? Wow, some of these guys have been married for a long time, it looks like. Congratulations. Think about it like this. The first date with your spouse, you kind of knew what was up in some way, shape, or form, right? The first date I went on with my wife, we'd known each other for 10 years. We'd never looked at each other like that. The first date, I was like, oh my God, I think I'm going to marry this chick, right? And here we are almost 2 years later. That same level of click is what I want you guys to start thinking about. Please don't date your clients. That's not what I'm saying, right? Don't get romantically involved with your clients. That's a bad idea. But what I'm talking about is your first interaction with someone is where they decide if they're going to work with you moving forward or not. Regardless of what we would like to think, that first interaction is arguably the most important thing. So nailing that first conversation that you have, regardless if you're calling them in a lead pond or you're getting a lead from Zillow or a new Facebook or Instagram lead or whatever it is, that first interaction we have to become masterful at. And normally becoming a master takes 10,000 hours of doing something. I'm going to give you guys the scripts on all these different lead types and conversations to have. It's going to be up to you to actually put them into practice. Has anyone ever heard of the knowing doing gap? Yeah, we all know what we should do, and sometimes we struggle with doing it. I'll give you an example. I'm training for a marathon right now, and my trainer's like, yo, Chris, don't eat Taco Bell. Whatever you like, I love Taco Bell. It's my once a week guilty pleasure. The guy's like, don't do it. At least like twice a month, I go to Taco Bell because I like it. I know what I should do. I should eat clean and stay in shape, and it's going to be great. But like, it is what it is. That's my knowing doing gap. The same thing happens when we start trying to implement new sales tactics into our process. How long have you guys been licensed for, out of curiosity? Can some people put some stuff in the chat for me, letting me know how long they've been licensed for, to give me a little bit of context? The reason why that's important is most of the time, 20 years. Congratulations, Julie. That's awesome. Misty, 21. Matthew Graham, 26. Jeez, man. Awesome. All right. Lots of experience in the business, lots of cool stuff. The way I want you to start thinking about this stuff is you likely have a process that you've already created a little bit. And I'm not saying scrap it. I'm saying take one or two things from what I'm going to give you and see how they work. Try it on for size, and I'll kind of walk you through what that looks like. Ben, 3 years, my man. Let's keep it going. Nacho Bel Grande, baby. I love it, Kay. That's funny. That's awesome. All right. So beyond intake, and again, I'm going to give you guys scripting and talk tracks for all these conversations and what they sound like. We have what happens before the appointment, right? Taco Bell was my first job. That's awesome, Pam. From a intake to initial appointment perspective, the way I want you to think about this is when you guys have probably in some way, shape, or form watched some training or coaching on the internet about how to do your job better. That's just what we do as agents, right? You've gone on YouTube and watched my friend Tom Ferry or Brian Buffini or John Cheplack or whoever it is. I love all of these guys and I've learned from all of them, but they forget some things sometimes, right? They forget these little nuances. And this is, in my opinion, this world we're going into, I call it real estate 3.0. What we have to start thinking about consumer interaction and conversion from is the nuances that happen. These little blips that no one really talks about is where all the magic happens, right? If you have an initial conversation with a buyer who wants to go see a house and you're like, great, you set the appointment, and then you just kind of show up to the showing and wing it. You text the listing agent, hey, Bob, can I show your house tomorrow at 4 p.m.? Yes, totally, Chris, no problem. Lockbox code is 1234. Awesome. Thank you. Bye. You set an appointment and you show up to that showing. I would argue that if you only do those two things, you're probably not super prepared to actually like sell that person that house. What happens if they like it? What happens if they're like, oh my God, Chris, this is the one? What happens at that point? Are you prepared to actually take advantage of that opportunity at that point in time with the information you've gathered so far? No. You have to kill all the momentum and say, okay, Mr. Buyer, let me go do my job now. I'm going to call the other party and I'm going to figure out what happens. And then you're going to drive home and you're going to get super distracted and Timmy in the backseat's going to eat a Hot Wheel and I'm going to kill all your momentum. And then you're going to get busy and I'm not going to be able to call you back for 2 days. And then it's going to suck and we're not going to convert the lead. Right? So these little nuances that happen between interactions with our customers are what makes magic. So again, I'm going to break it down for you guys and give you all of this in scripting and talk tracks. Today's just about the macro and what I want you to start framing the thinking about. Next is going to be the showing and consultation. Out of curiosity, by a show of hands in the chat or pings in the chat or whatever it may be, when you first got your real estate license, and we've got a lot of experience on this call today, how many of you had someone show you how to show a house and give you a script and a talk track on how to do it the right way? Or did you kind of just wing it? Those are usually the two things, right? If you worked for a builder, usually they give you a script. Misty said, nope, we winged it, right? I winged it too. It's one of those things where a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Perfect. I'm not saying my way is perfect and it's the coolest thing on the planet. But when we wing things, it's like, I think it's a Thomas Jefferson quote, right? Like failing to plan is planning to fail, right? When we go into an interaction the right way, actually showing, but no to the rest of it, Marty says, awesome. I'm going to give you guys a scripting and talk track on how to do two things really, really well. When you're actually face-to-face with someone, there's a difference between a showing and a buyer consultation. Yes or yes. There's a massive difference between those two things, right? The initial showing with an online lead, the way to think about it is, it's like speed dating. You have 20 minutes with someone where you get to just try and figure out like, hey, how do I make this person my BFF and trust me, right? Do we think they've likely spoken with a couple of agents up to that point? Probably. Is their sister-in-law an agent? Probably, right? There's I think there's like 375,000 licensed real estate agents in the great state of Texas. Right? That's a lot of real estate agents. Statistically, if you walked out in front of your house and threw a rock, you'd probably hit one, right? So knowing that, we have to stand out to this person. So there's a script for how to show a house the right way, right? In my opinion, in my thoughts, again, it's not the best, it's not the only way, but it's a good way. And then there's a script and a talk track for how to actually conduct a buyer consultation. Are we always going to be in a spot where we can take the client back to our office and conduct a perfect buyer consult? No. Sometimes we have to do a buyer consultation out in front of the house in 10 minutes or less because they have to go take Johnny to soccer practice, right? So having the flexibility of the way the script is broken down is it's before they enter the house, inside the house, and after the house. So it's 3 separate parts. The whole goal of that initial interaction is to do one of 2 things. Either don't leave without a second appointment booked, even if that second appointment is a phone call to follow up and see what's going to happen next, or conducting a buyer consultation in some way, shape, or form on the spot there, or an appointment to do so. The last thing I want you guys to get in the habit of is going out in front of the house and doing the traditional like realtor thing where you do like jazz hands and go, so what do you think? Right? And the client's like, very rarely do they say, yes, you know what, Griselia, I want to buy it. I'm in. Most of the time, what do they say when you say that? We need to think about it, right? It's okay. We need to think about it. What they're telling you is secretly that they have 10,000 bajillion things going on in their brain and they need an expert to walk them through it, right? So I'll give you guys a little preview of the script. My favorite question to ask a buyer after a showing, and regardless if it's my first, second, or 10th showing with someone is, cool. So Misty, I like to walk my clients through a really simple exercise to help you make sense of what's going on in your brain. From a scale of I love it to I want to burn it down, what did we like about this house and what did we absolutely hate about it, right? When we ask questions like that, what do you think we get answers around? The truth. They're going to tell you the truth at that point. Well, Chris, I really liked that it was 2-story. That's like top of our wish list. We want to have a master bedroom downstairs so our kids can be crazy psychopaths upstairs and not bother us, right? We like the fact that it was on a half-acre lot. That's super important. We have dogs, and we love the school districts it's in. But Chris, we absolutely hated the yellow paint downstairs and the dated tile. As a salesperson, my job is to sell that person a house, right? Not in a cringy used car salesman perspective, but in a, hey, if someone says they love everything they can't change about a house, but they hate everything they can change about a house, what is that telling me? Hey, consultant level, 100%, William. It goes into, hey, so the good news is you love the school district. We can't change that. The good news is you love the layout of the house being 2 levels like this with a master downstairs and your kid's bedroom is upstairs. We can't change that. The bad news is you don't like the floors and the paint. The better news is there's this place called Home Depot, right? And you can go to Home Depot and very affordably at like $2, maybe $3 a square foot, we can change out all the flooring downstairs. So that's easy, right? And they also have a paint department, right? And in this paint department, we can work with an interior designer who will pick paint colors for in your house based on what you like. And they'll even come and paint it. It's crazy. And obviously I'm doing this to make you guys laugh, but you see where I'm going with this, right? We need to stop relying on people to make decisions without us as a consultant level, like William was saying, right? We are shepherds. Our goal is to guide them to homeownership, not just saying to someone, hey, I'm going to send you listings. Let me know which ones you like. And then getting to a showing and saying, so what do you think? That's not shepherding someone home. What they're doing your job at that point. Right? We need to remember that our job is to lead people to self-discovery. We are shepherds of people that want to buy and sell real estate. And when you think about it that way, think about the way you would want to be treated. If you went to a car dealership and said, hey, I'm looking to buy a car, and they go, cool, what do you want? And it just kept coming back on you. I don't know. What do you think? Right? Do you really feel like you're getting a level of service, or do you want the guy to say, hey, so you have 6 kids. I have this giant Sprinter van. That's probably a good fit for you, right? We want to have this level of like enthusiasm and helping someone work through the thoughts in their brain. When you ask that question of, what do you think? And they go, yeah, I don't know. Take that as like an invitation to dig deeper, right? We should never ask that question in the first place, but start thinking about people are confused and they need us to help them. That's the best way to think about it. So the buyer, the actual showing and the consultation. The next is going to be follow-up. I'll preface this by this. One of the trainings that we're going to go through, I'm going to teach you guys how to follow up with leads without ever saying the word follow-up, right? You don't call someone and say, hey, Amanda, I'm just calling to follow up. How's your home search going? right? That's not anything of value. When you say things like that, most of the time consumers on the other end are going, hey, I got a lot going on, bye, click, or they don't even answer the phone. Part of the training that we're going to go through probably week 4 or 5 is a training series I call Pokeballs, right? And Pokeballs, I don't know why I came up with that, but I think I was eating a Lunchable maybe when I came up with that, and it was like just fresh in my brain. But the idea is ways you can follow up with people that are consistently providing value, right? It's not a, hey, I'm poking you. Are you ready to buy a house yet? I need to make money. It's, hey, here's something of value. I'll give you an example. mortgageratenews.com, right? There's always information about what rates are doing and what happened in the market that day, et cetera, et cetera. Instead of saying to someone, hey, I'm calling to follow up, how's your home search coming along? You reach out to them, you shoot them a text message with a link to a news article saying, hey, William, saw this today on mortgagenewsrate.com. Looks like rates have come down a little bit. I'm curious what you think, right? It's doing and giving something of value that's like a, hey, I was thinking about you. I did some homework. Here's something that isn't just me calling to bug you. By proxy, they're going to have, oh, cool, I didn't see that. Yeah, I think X, Y, and Z. Oh, by the way, we're looking to maybe potentially go see houses this weekend. Are you available? It's a way to provide value without just continually bugging someone about like, hey, ready to buy yet? Help me, money, want money, right? That's not what we're trying to do. And then lastly, I'm going to walk you guys through the science of writing and getting offers accepted. This is one of the little nuances that no one really ever talks about, right? Is it simple enough where if you have a client who wants to buy a house in this market, you can just write one offer and get it accepted? Is that the way it's working? Probably not. It's pretty competitive still. There's multiple offers on most properties. As far as I'm concerned, you guys will have to bear with me. I just moved to Texas from California, so I'm not super familiar with the market here. This is another opportunity to throw rotten fruit if you would like, because I am a Californian moving to Texas. Boo, this guy, right? There's little nuances that go along here on getting offers accepted that no one talks about. Like, how does the conversation sound? If I'm a new agent who's only been licensed for a year or two, and I have to call a listing agent that's been in the business for as long as like a Misty or a William has, what am I going to say to them to get my offer accepted? How do I communicate with them to make sure that I'm not being pushy, but I'm also being thorough enough to negotiate from a good perspective that I want this property for my client, right? All these little nuances and conversations that happen along the conversion path are what I'm going to walk you guys through. But for the sake of today and getting something valuable out of this, how I want you to start formulating this in your brain is, think about every lead you have. And when you look at this box of 5 steps right here, every lead you have lives somewhere in one of these 5 boxes, right? Whether they're in a nurture stage in that follow-up category, or you're preparing for your initial showing with them, or you're showing them property. Your customers will only live in one of these 5 boxes forever. There's a 6th box that's not on here, which is like once they've actually closed, right? And you actually have to continue fostering that relationship. But having this roadmap in your brain gives you an ability to go, cool, what's the next step with this person? I want you to start thinking about that when you're conceptualizing your pipeline is, ask yourself one simple question with every lead in your database. What's the next step? What do I need to do to put this person into escrow faster? Whatever that is, there's always something. Well, Chris, I need to get him on the phone. Congratulations, that's a step, right? You need to follow up with that person until you get him on the phone. Well, I need to get him out and actually seeing property. Congratulations. Instead of calling someone and saying, hey, Sheila, are you available to go see houses this weekend? Pull a property you know they're going to like. Shoot them off a text message and say, hey, William, I just found a house that I know you're going to absolutely love. The address is 123 ABC Street. I just had a cancellation on my schedule for Saturday. I don't know if you're around in the afternoon to go see it, but I'd love to show it to you, right? The difference between those 2 statements is massive. So as you start to conceptualize your pipeline, think about it like this. They only live in one of these 5 boxes, and ask yourself the question of, what's the next step? Always. Does that make sense to everyone? Cool. From an intake perspective, and I'll start kind of tearing through some of these from a little bit more micro of a level. The way I want you to think about it is, there's intake at this stage. There's not 10,000 different scenarios. You have 2 things. You have a lead and you have a prospect, right? The difference between these 2 is super important because this is going to dictate the frequency of follow-up that you have with folks. From a lead perspective, right? A lead is someone that is like hot, right? They're ready to go, but they're not super ready to go like a prospect is, but they're someone that you want to be communicating with. They're in the top to middle of the funnel. There's varying levels of communication. Does anyone ever feel like they're playing a game of one-sided phone tag with someone? You ever heard of one-sided phone tag? That's where you call someone 10 times and they never call you back, right? Very common. Yes. Cool. So you're playing one-sided phone tag with this person. It's predominantly been one step, one-way communication. There's several steps from actualization as far as you're concerned. These are people that you don't know if they're pre-qualified yet. You don't know where they're at. How frequently do we think we should be calling someone that's in this lead stage out of curiosity? Can someone give me an idea in a chat? If you don't really know what's going on, how frequently should we be reaching out to that person? Once a week, Micah says. Once a week. I like that. These are good answers. Okay. The short answer is, and what I want to give you guys, what happens if it's not a frequency thing? What happens if it's a duration thing, right? Depends on stage, says Gracelia. Think about it like this. When someone's in this lead stage, right, on that intake kind of category, the way I want you to think about it is you should be calling them until you figure out if they're a lead or a prospect, right? I'm not saying call them 10 times a day. That's the fastest way to get blocked. Has anyone ever gotten blocked before? That's when you know you're following up probably a little too much, right? Or a little too aggressively without a whole lot of value. So the correct answer here is, I love once a week. I love calling them forever, right? You just have to figure out how to call from a place of value, and I'm going to teach you guys that. On the intake side, on the prospect side, this is where these leads are like, they become something that's tangible. These are lower to middle of funnel. The way I want you to think about this is most of the leads that you guys are getting currently from these sources, the pay-per-click, the Zillow, all these different platforms, most of these people are going to be prospects. People usually don't go on Zillow or Realtor.com or pay-per-click and submit an inquiry about touring a house unless they're serious about seeing it, right? Does that mean that you get face-to-face with them and they're just going to lay down and go, cool, first house, offer accepted, pay me? That's not how it works, right? But remembering that, for example, I'll give you a case with Zillow. The way Zillow works is they don't have to submit an inquiry in order to see house, like to continue to view properties on Zillow. Can anyone give me some context as to how long they think the average consumer looks on a website like Zillow or a pay-per-click website before they actually submit an inquiry? So between their first visit and they're actually pushing the button. Okay, Sheila says 7 months, 6 months, 3 months. Good. It's about 6 to 7 months. They look at about 1,100 properties before they submit an inquiry, right? To give you some context, that's a lot. When we think about that, is it a fair statement that that person probably has a little bit of paralysis by analysis when they're thinking about, like, they've looked at 1,100 houses? What? That's gnarly. That'd cross anyone's eyes. So thinking about where this person's at, they're usually qualified in some way, shape, or form, or they've at least looked at mortgage options. They have predominantly two-way communication established with you. That's when you know you got someone. When someone is communicating with you actively via call, text, whatever it is, you're good. They're one step away from actualization, meaning if they find a house, they can actually go buy it. So before we move on, I want you to think about quickly leads that you have in your database and prospects that you have in your database. And are they properly segmented? Do you have your hot prospects that are ready to transact somehow segmented in your database, right? You guys are using Follow-Up Boss, so there's a really easy way to do it with like a tag. Do you have your database segmented by lead and prospect? Because the frequency and communication and follow-up is really, really important here. How frequent do we think we should be following up with a prospect in a perfect world? In my opinion, it's like daily. There you go. Yes. My people, they get it. Awesome. Daily is the answer here. It's not a, hey, I'm alive. Good morning, right? You ready to go into escrow? It's something in some way, shape, or form communicating some sort of value. But the way I want you to think about that is, has anyone ever had a client that they thought was a prospect and then went to an open house and like did a deal with the listing agent? Has anyone ever had that happen? It's gross, but it happens every once in a while. Usually that's a frequency thing. We're not following up with them frequently enough, and they thought they could just go and they got snaked, and it is what it is. Daily is the answer with these folks. So I'm going to give you guys a little preview of a script that I want you to start thinking about, right? From a perspective and initial intake call with Zillow leads specifically. And I promised you guys I was going to give this to you at the end, and we're reaching where we're going. My ask is don't just read this and stop listening, because I'm going to tell you the why with this script real quick. And again, I'm going to send this to you guys in a full drive so you have all of it. You can read it totally all on your own time. This is a script that I created, right? So the ALM scripting's been around for a long time. I added the last two S's. So know what you're thinking. Oh my gosh, Chris, another corny acronym for a script, right? It works really well. I've ran it like 10,000 times at this point. I want to talk to you guys about the why. So with Zillow leads specifically, and again, I have scripts for the Google stuff, the Instagram stuff, the Facebook stuff, all of this. The way I want you to think about it is when you're intaking an online lead, especially from Zillow, what is your primary goal on that first phone call? What's the most important thing? Setting an appointment. That's all you care about. I don't care if the client's pre-approved. I don't care how long they've been looking. I don't care. And again, this is me saying I don't care. Maybe you care, but I would encourage you to maybe care a little bit less, because your whole outcome and what you're after is getting face-to-face with that consumer. That's all that matters. Because why? Statistically, right, having measured hundreds of thousands of these things, the faster you can close the duration between intake and initial meeting, your conversion rate multiplies at a rapid pace, right? That first interaction is all we're after, getting face-to-face with that person as soon as humanly possible. So when you're going through this script, has anyone ever seen this script out of curiosity, the ALM scripting before? A couple people? Okay, so this is brand new. I'm going to walk you guys through the why. Shame on Zillow for not giving this to you guys. From a why perspective, your first goal, and I'm going to go kind of deep on this because I want to be conscious of your guys' time too. When we're looking at the initial bucket here, the first thing that we're going to do is set an appointment, right? The highlighted parts on this script are your verbiage. Now, before I say and go through this, I'm going to give you guys your first homework assignment before I forget, because if you can't tell, I'm a little bit of an ADD squirrel, and I will forget and not tell you, and then I'll be like, crap, I forgot to tell them. Your homework is optional but awesome, right? And what that means is you don't have to do it, right? You guys do whatever you want. But if you're like, Chris, I want to dramatically improve my online lead conversion, then your homework is like non-negotiable, right? But for the sake of the argument, it's optional but awesome. Your homework is to take this script. And again, you're going to have a drive with this that you guys can access. I want you to take it. I want you to print it out. And if that means going to Kinko's or UPS or FedEx or whatever and doing that, fantastic. And I want you to spend at least an hour over the course of the next week before we meet next, reading through it and maybe role-playing it with your spouse or your dog, right? Dogs are great role-playing partners. They don't really talk back, right? But they're good at listening. They look very intently, usually because they think you're going to give them a treat of some kind, right? But just going through it and role-playing it. Cats, yes, 100%. Cats are good role-playing partners too. The way I want you to think about it is, while we're getting good at this, right, and familiarizing ourselves with it, the best practice is to read it almost word for word. The first couple of calls you do, the first couple of role plays you do, I want you to use it almost verbatim, right? 2.0 is where we're going to take it to the next level. This script is written in Cristianos, right? Which is a kind of like informal surfer douchebag from California, right? So it's written with some slang and some Southern California slang and lingo and stuff, right? I don't want you guys to sound like a Cristiano sock puppet. I want you to sound like William and Marty and Amanda. I want you to sound like yourselves. And how we're going to do that is homework 2.0 later, that don't do it yet. We're going to write our script out by hand, right? In our own words, so that we can, does that mean you don't say y'all? No, I've started saying y'all, Marty. I've become like, I have got some good friends that live over in Fort Worth. I went to the Fort Worth rodeo and sat with, what's her name? The mayor of Fort Worth, Maddie. And I had to buy cowboy boots and a cowboy hat. So I am officially now a Texan and I say y'all. It's great. From a internalizing this perspective, you guys will write it out in your own words, right? And then it will start to sound first nature. But for the sake of the argument, we want to do it the right way and the kind of textbook way first. So I'm going to run you guys through this at a 30,000 foot view. The initial thing that we're going to do, right, is we're going to introduce ourselves. So we get on the phone with a Zillow lead that's coming through as a connection in some way, shape, or form. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to introduce ourselves. Now, if you notice, there's a couple of words on here that are bolded and underlined throughout this script. And the reason they're bolded and underlined is because they're really, really, really incredibly important, right? So if I get on the phone with someone that's a Zillow lead, the first thing I'm going to say is, hi, this is Cristianos, your Zillow Premier Agent with Three Chords Realty Group. How are you, Bob? The reason I'm saying Zillow Premier Agent is why? Do people nationally yet, they will someday, but do most people know who Three Chords Realty is yet? No, that's okay. We're new, we're exciting, we're new to the marketplace. That's fantastic. There's never a more exciting time than that. Do people know who Zillow is? Yeah, Zillow's a verb, right? Zillow has achieved that level of brand recognition. Love them or hate them. You don't Google your home value, you Zillow it, right? Which sucks. I wish I came up with that business model, but I was a child when they did that, right? There's pass-through brand equity here. The way I want you to think about it is by associating yourself with Zillow, they don't know you, but if you say, hey, I'm a Zillow Premier Agent, in their brain, what does that do? It connects the dots and they go, oh, cool. Zillow trusts William, therefore I can now trust William, right? It's called pass-through trust equity. This is credibility. Nailed it, Misty. It just gives you, it instantly puts you in an elevated place. You're not just an agent, you're a Zillow Premier Agent, which some people are like, yeah, and some people are like, no, I hate Zillow. I'm never saying that. It helps tremendously. And I've run it 1,000 times. Consumer says, I'm good and you go, fantastic. Thank you. I understand you're interested in 123 ABC Street. That's a fantastic home. When would you like to go see the home today? Another bolded, underlined keyword there, today. Why are we saying today? Can anyone give me some context? Take yourself off of mute. Okay.
Speed to lead.
Speed to lead, Misty.
Urgency.
Yeah. The way I want you to think about it is a lot of people have a natural reaction to say, when would you like to see the home? Right? And then sometimes the consumer says something very silly, like, how does a week from Friday at 4 sound? And you're like, that house isn't even going to be on the market on a week from Friday at 4, right? Or maybe it will be. The way I want you guys to think about it is after having split tested and ran through about 1,000 different scenarios, I found the fastest way to do it is to say today, because guess what they're going to say 90% of the time statistically? They're going to go, and again, quote me on this. And the first time you have one of these conversations, you're going to remember that I'm saying this to you right now. And you're going to ping me during training or afterwards. And you're going to go, oh my gosh, Chris, you read their mind. The first thing they're going to say is, right? They're going to go, I don't know. How does 4:30 or 5 o'clock work? Right? They're going to say it just like that. And you're going to be like, oh my gosh, Chris, what? So they're going to go, I don't know, 4:30 or 5 o'clock. Right? And you're going to go, perfect. Awesome. Let's plan on doing that. I'm going to double check with the seller, bolded and underlined keyword here. Why do we want to say seller versus the word? There's a bunch of bad words. There's one really, 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 really incredibly bad word that you don't ever want to say on a phone call. What is that bad word? And again, no F-bombs, please. Listing agent. Right? You don't want to say listing agent on the phone, because what do they say when you say listing agent? You're not the listing agent, Chris, right? And then guess what? You've created a can of worms for yourself and unnecessarily created an objection. We're not going to lie to them. Lying is not good. We don't want to lie or mislead or dissuade people, but we can use selective words so we don't have to like stick our foot in it. So I'm going to double check with the seller, which is by proxy what you're doing, right? That is factual. And I'll get right back to you to confirm. While I have you on the phone, Bob, were there any other properties that you've seen online that I'd love to check, like that you want to check out? I'd love to make the most of our time together, right? The reason we want to ask this question is why? Why do we want to show them multiple houses on our first interaction with them? Because statistically, people don't buy the first house they see. How many do they see before they usually submit their first offer statistically? 6. They see 6 houses before they submit an offer. And again, how I came to that conclusion was crippling amounts of data and Tableau and crossing my eyes over it for a decade. They see 6 houses before they submit their first offer. Statistically, they're not even going to get that first offer accepted either. But the faster we can get them to 6 is the faster that they're going to statistically write. It's not always going to work out perfectly, but that's the magic number. So with that being said, do we want to ever just show them one house? No, we want to try and show them 2 or 3 so they have a little bit of compare and contrast. The other thing I want you to think about is the greatest rapport builder of all time, right, is time. And I'm going to say that again and slow it down. The greatest rapport builder of all time is time. You spend time with people, guess what happens? We've now been on this call for like 55 minutes. And if you guys haven't noticed, progressively, my jokes have gotten a little bit edgier because I'm like, hey, I can feel people out. I got a crowd that likes to laugh. This is great. We can make it fun. I don't have to be super polished. And we probably feel a little bit more rapport between us now, right? We don't feel like strangers. The amount of time you spend with someone is paramount. You spend 20, 30 minutes with them at one showing or 3 or 4 hours with them transversing between multiple showings and showing them multiple houses. Guess what happens? They start to talk about their family, their occupation, their dreams, their children. All these different things start coming out. And when you do that, a relationship gets built, and that's what we're after. So statistically, we want to try and show multiple houses. I'd like to see the house on Anita Incarnation. If possible, great. We'll add those to our tour. We're now on this motivation part. May I ask in particular what you liked about these properties? We're trying to get to the deep part of what they liked. Sometimes you're going to have to poke the consumer back because they're going to tell you something silly. They're going to say, well, Chris, I like the fact that it had 4 walls and a 2-car garage and a roof. And you're going to say, congratulations, you just described every house in North America, right? That doesn't really do a whole lot for me. So sometimes you got to dig a little bit deeper. For the sake of the example, I like the floor plans. They were turnkey. I'm looking at Newport Beach. Awesome. The last part on here, we want to try and get a time frame. Now, there's a really important asterisk on this. Obviously, we want to know how motivated of a consumer they are. That's important. The wrong way to ask this question is by saying, how quickly do you see yourself in a new home? Or when were you trying to get into a new house by? That from a consumer, I'll give you an example. So let's say that you guys, someone on this call closed a big transaction, was like, I'm going to go buy a brand new S-Class Mercedes, right? You're doing the total agent thing. It's even going to be a white Mercedes. So it's just total stereotype, right? And you call the dealership and you say, hey, S-Class, like, let's do this. They go, cool. How quickly do you want to buy that car? And in your head, what do you feel as a consumer very quickly? Pressure. Right? It creates kind of an uncomfortable conversation. So we can still ask the question, but it becomes really, really important how we ask the question, what words we use. So we can definitely find you homes that meet that criteria, Bob. And just so I'm moving at your pace, do you have a definitive date that you need to be in a home by, or do you have a little bit more flexibility? Right? That question makes it about them, not us. And by proxy, we get what we want out of it, which is what? I want to know how motivated they are, right? But we make it about them. When you ask that question the right way, you're going to get the truth, right? And the truth could be, yes, Chris, my mother-in-law just bought the house next to us. And if we don't move soon, I'm going to end up on an episode of 60 Minutes, right? That's a joke. Obviously, we don't want that to happen, but you'll hear things that are true like that, right? Where they're like, hey, I'm under a time constraint because Jimmy just got into a private school that's 30 minutes away and we got to drive and I want to get closer. They'll tell you the truth when you make it about them, not about yourself. Does that make sense to everyone? Cool. These 2 S's are the most important thing on here. We're now going to summarize and ask for a survey. So from a survey or summarized perspective, buyers are liars. Have you ever heard that before? It's the truth. We want to make sure that they have clarity on what happens next. So how we do that is really simple. So what's going to happen after we get off this call is this, Mr. Bob. I'm going to send you a text message with all of my contact information so you know how to get a hold of me if any questions come up. I'll also confirm with the seller about our showing today at 3 p.m. and I'll get back to you in about 20 minutes. If it's okay with you, so this is our first little micro value add that we're going to give them. I'm also going to do some homework and shoot over a few additional listings that fit your criteria. How does this all sound? What do we think we're doing with that little word right there? If it's okay with you, I'm going to do something of value. It's making a deposit in the value bank where they're going, oh, I don't need to look for houses anymore. Chris is going to handle that for me, right? It's the first little proof of concept thing we got. Sounds fantastic. The last part on here is survey, right? We're going to tell them in about 24 hours, Zillow is going to be sending you a text message with a link asking about the level of service I provided on this call. Is there anything else I can do to earn a 5-star rating from you so far? We're asking for that proactively. Why? because they're going to get that. And we want our CSAT score on Zillow to be nice and high, so we look good. We're prepping them for that. Most of the time, they're going to say, nope, you've been awesome. You crushed all of my expectation. Perfect. Last part on here is my name is, again, Chris, and I'll be in touch shortly. How do you know you said your name enough on the call? When after you say this the last time, they go, thank you, Chris. Talk to you soon. When they repeat your name back to you, you know you've said your name enough. Does this make sense to everyone? Great. So this is one of the scripts that's going to be in the bucket of stuff I'm going to send you. Now, let me show you how to get it, because this is a really long presentation that we don't have time for today. So to get access to all of these scripts, if you're not on Instagram, I'll put my email in the chat for you. But if you're on Instagram, I already have this set up, which is the easiest way to do it. If you follow me, this is my handle. It's my first dot, my last name. And if you DM me the word scripts with an S on the end, the system will auto send you into a portal to download all of this stuff. If you're not on Instagram, which is completely fine, the first thing I'll say is you should totally consider getting on Instagram, because it's awesome and there's lots of good stuff on there. I'm going to send you guys my email address in the chat so you have it. If you're not on Instagram and you want a copy of the scripts, just email me and I will totally shoot over the scripts in a Drive format for you as well. So this has been awesome. I have to go and jump onto my next appointment, Sheila and Misty, but this was great. And I'll leave you guys with this. Homework, print that script out, read through it, practice it with your dog or significant other, right? Or maybe call Sheila or Misty. I'm sure they'd be happy to role play it with you, or call one of each other and go through it. The goal is just to internalize it a little bit and get familiar with it, because next week we're going to be diving into something that's really important, which is how do we actually put it into practice, and what type of objections are we actually going to be getting on following calls, because they're not always going to go perfect. There's going to be a lot of the time where we get a wrench thrown at us on a call, and I want to make sure you guys are prepared for that. We're also next week going to dive into specifically different types of scripts for different types of leads. So we'll talk about the pay-per-click stuff. We'll talk about the social media stuff. I'm going to give you guys the toolbox to handle a wide swath of things. We'll get through objection handling, and then we'll start talking about how to prepare for a showing. Does this sound good? Cool. Awesome chatting with you, ladies and gentlemen. Feel free to DM me. Sheila and Misty, I'll talk to you guys in a bit, but thank you.